Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hey, man. What's
All
up?
right. Oh, I just did. It's bothering me, and I just wanted to talk about it and see if we can clear it up, right?
Okay.
Okay. So, you say that a year or two ago in a chat window, I said that I'd watched the documentary and agreed with it. Is that right?
That's not what you said. You said, yeah, well, who makes a light bulb that lasts 100 years anyway? That was your response. I mean, I'm not making fun of you. That was the response that you gave.
Wait,
Um,
sorry. Did I say that I had watched the documentary?
that's what I got out of it. Yes,
No, no.
was
Did
I
I
asked
say
you,
no,
had
no,
you
no, no,
watched
no?
it?
Sorry. Did I say that I had watched the documentary?
I asked you if you had watched the documentary. The response that you gave me was, who makes a light bulb that lasts 100 years anyway?
So I did not confirm that I had watched the documentary.
It's been a long time, but
So you
that's what I
can't remember
remember.
very well, but you can't remember, for this is a year or two ago in a chat window or whatever, right?
Well, yeah.
But you understand that you're openly feeding a guy telling me that I had watched the documentary, that I agreed with it, and this and that, right? This is not what
No,
you
no,
even
no. I didn't say
remember,
that you
right?
said you agreed with it.
But you
No, I
told
didn't
him
say
that I
that you
had
said you
watched the
agreed.
documentary. Because that's what he said. He said, no, you already conceded this point to Neil, that you had watched the documentary, that you agreed with it. I mean, where's he getting that from?
That's the context I took out of the conversation. I'm not trying to lie about you here, man. I'm telling you that's what I got out of it.
No, no, but what you got out of it is not what's important because you're claiming that I said something. So what you got out of it is a subjective experience, right? If you, because you don't have a record of it anymore, so you're going off your memory, right? For a year or two ago.
Well, yeah, that's what I told you. I was openly honest about that.
Well, but okay, so you don't remember much about it. I mean,
No,
obviously,
I
right?
said I remember
Y-
what you did say. That's the one thing. You know, whether or not the context is enough for you to feel that that was enough for you to say you had watched it. That's, I guess, up to individual interpretation. I also acknowledge it's possible that's not what you meant.
Okay, so because what he was saying to me was that I had watched this and had conceded this point. Now he must have been getting that from you because I he wasn't part of that whatever chat we had a year or two ago, right?
Right. I told him that when it happened. I talked to a lot of people about that exchange because people were curious what you thought about planned obsolescence. They'd seen you make videos about it in the past.
Right.
That's why I shared the documentary with you in the first place.
So what you shared the chat my chat response with him, is that right? Like a year or two ago?
Yes, at the time.
Oh, so he may have a copy of it, right? Because you'd have copied or pasted that, right?
He may. I'd have
Okay.
to ask him.
So there's no, I mean, I never said that I watched the documentary. I just want the, because I have no, I was just talking about this with my wife. Like, no memory of watching a documentary about light bulbs, especially in such a contentious issue as planned obsolescence, which I've taken a strong stand on. I'm sure I would have probably watched it with my wife. I talked about it with her and all that kind of stuff, and she has no memory of it. So I didn't watch a documentary on light bulbs, and so I don't know how it could be construed, or that I had suddenly, like, I never said that I watched the documentary. It's sort of basic. I haven't watched the documentary. I never said that I'd watched the documentary, but I'm being accused of lying about watching a documentary. That's got to be coming from you, and I'm just saying, look, it's not very responsible to have a half remembered chat from a year or two ago and then put these accusations out there. I mean, I'm going to be fine. I just think that you should be clear about the limitations of what is being talked about here, right? Which is that it's not something I admitted to in a video. It's not something that I typed out. Well, I watched it. I agree with it, and now I'm somehow, for some reason, backtracking or something like that. Like, I just want to be clear that you're putting forward a accusation of dishonesty or disingenuousness on my part that is not backed up by anything, certainly not anything that I remember, and nothing that you have any particular, like, even what you remember is not any kind of admission, so to speak, right? It's just a comment,
Okay,
which you
well,
could take a number
I
of
gave
different
you,
ways, right?
right, I gave you what I took out of the context of the conversation at the time,
No,
because
no,
that's
no,
what I
no,
took out of
no.
it.
Sorry,
But,
you're not understanding what I'm saying. This is important just from an integrity standpoint. Doesn't matter too much to me. This is
okay.
just some internet frou-frou, but you can't just get something out of it and then say that it's true, right? Those two things are
Well,
not the same, right? Like if
I
I
think
tell you
it's
I went abroad and you say, well, that means Paraguay. Well, that's what I got out of it. It's like, no, if you say I said I went to Paraguay, then I said I went to Paraguay or I didn't, right? If you got something out of it that was incorrect, then you need to own up that it was incorrect, right? Or at least not
okay.
decisive,
Well,
right?
what I'm telling you, Stefan, is that it's likely or even possible. Okay, I'm going to say possible that we have a miscommunication about what took place. That's what I remember having had the conversation with you at the time. Is what I took out of the conversation, out of the exchange. It's possible that that's not what you meant, which means it could be very well be a misunderstanding.
But sorry,
That's why I just gave you.
no, what so
I
again,
gave.
you're still
Okay,
not
well, I gave
understanding
you.
what I'm saying. I'm sorry to be annoying, right? You can't just say this is what I got out of the exchange. And it's not a miscommunication, right? If I typed who needs a 100-year-old light bulb or something like that, I mean, I don't even that doesn't. I mean, I don't even know why would I even say that? I mean, of course it would be great to have a 100-year light bulb. I mean, anything that lasts longer is better.
Because
What I mean is that
the reason
sorry, go ahead.
okay, the reason why it's not better to have light bulbs that last 100 years is because you can't have a market for something that people are all going to buy and then not need again for 100 years. That's why they
Well, sure, but
gradually lower
we
the
have a
lifespan of light
smallpox
bulbs.
vaccine. We have a polio vaccine. Those things are one shot and they don't get used anymore. This is what people do. I mean, there's no problem with it. But
The
the point
medical industry is very different.
but the point is, right, that if I made a comment about a 100-year light bulb, that could mean any number of things, right? So I could mean who wants a 100-year light bulb if it costs a huge amount, right? Who wants a 100-year light bulb since most people only live in a house for 5 or 10 years, right? It could mean that. It could mean like in terms from the consumer standpoint, right? Now, these are just two. I mean, I'm sure I could come up with another half dozen more, but who would want a 100-year light bulb if it costs $500 and you're only going to live in a house for 5 or 10 years? You know, when I was a student,
They
I moved
don't. They
18
didn't
times in.
cost that
Hang on.
much, though. They
No,
actually didn't cost
but
much
if I
more than
hadn't,
anything.
but you understand, if I hadn't watched the documentary, I wouldn't know that, right?
Well, that's the comment.
So
Okay,
what I'm trying to say is that if that's what I said, and you know, it doesn't seem likely to me that even that's what I said, but if that's what I said, it could mean any number of things. It doesn't mean I watched the documentary and I agreed with it. It doesn't mean that I think that people, you know, that capitalism doesn't have any value in things that you only buy once and never buy again. So, you know, I've put a lot out about planned obsolescence, about how it's the consumer who chooses, and I've put out a lot about how cartels are very hard, if not impossible, to sustain in a free market, and so on. So what I'm trying to point out is that what I got sort of publicly accused of, and now I'm being even more publicly accused of, is lying. And that comes,
okay.
you started that. You called me a liar to someone who is now openly calling me a liar, and you don't know that I lied. I don't have any memory of lying.
I actually didn't call you a liar, Stefan. I said that, yeah, I told him about an interaction that I had with you, and then he decided to quote me in a debate with you. I didn't then tell you that you were lying, and that's why I said that's
Wait,
why when I commented, you said you would
did you tell
appreciate
him that
that.
I had watched the documentary?
Yes, because
Well,
that's what I
that's not
believe to be
true. No,
true.
that is not true. What you recall of that chat window in no way indicates that I watched the documentary. Do you understand the difference? If I said I
I
watched the
understand.
documentary and then now I publicly say I don't, then I'm either misremembering or lying, right? Okay, I understand that. But if I say who wants a 100-year light bulb, there could be 6 million reasons I would say something like that, none of which have to do with any proof that I did or didn't watch the documentary.
Generally, if I ask you the question, did you watch the documentary, and you give me a response, because that is the question that I do in fact remember, okay, um,
That you remember.
I'm
Honestly, you don't
yes.
have a record of this. And I mean, come on, you can't tell me you're on the internet a lot. You ping me, you ping a lot of
Hmm.
people. You probably have 1,000 or 2,000 chats every year. I mean, you
Sure.
can't seriously tell me that you remember in detail what the question was and what the answer was from a year or two ago, thousands of chats ago. I mean, seriously, come on. You and I know that memory is fallible, that, you know, this is why you need proof. And I'm not sort of saying you've got to provide me proof, and I know you switched OSs and all that, but you can't seriously say that you can hang your hat on something like that in terms of what you may or like. This is just such an uncertain thing that you're hanging on here, right? it's a question you think you may have asked. It's a response of mine that could be interpreted any number of different ways. And then to go from there to say, to give this guy the impression that he can then publicly, obviously, call me a liar, and that he's, I think I put the quote in the chat window that he put in. To see what he said. Yeah, he lied. I didn't let him slither out of it. End of story. Right? You understand?
Right.
You said
And
that.
I commented about that.
Right.
What's that?
But you set that in motion.
I set that in motion?
Yeah, because
no, I didn't tell him I think you're lying. Because
no,
I don't know if you're lying. That's not the question. Is it possible that you just don't remember? I've acknowledged that possibility. Okay. I can tell you, I asked you if you watched the documentary. That was the question I asked you. Your answer was.
The question that you remember.
Why would anybody make a light bulb over 100 pounds?
The question that you remember asking me may not be the same question that you asked. It may have been, have you ever heard of a documentary about 100-year light bulbs? And I say, well, who would want a 100-year light bulb? You don't know. Honestly, you have thousands of chats every year. This is a year or two ago. Are you honestly telling me that you could repeat that? I mean, that's just not credible. You understand? I can't remember chats that I had 2 weeks ago.
Okay, I'm sorry you feel that way. I've told you that, what I suggest to you is to get past any of that and say, I don't recall watching this documentary. Now that I have, this is my comment. And then just move past it.
Because that doesn't matter. Look, the important thing is that you put forward a claim that is not supportable, that is negative towards me, right? And you need to clean that up. That's not. You didn't do an honorable thing there.
I didn't call you a liar, Stefan. I said that I remember giving you the link, and that's the response that you gave me. I've also admitted that it's possible it was a misunderstanding, and that you did not mean what I took out of it. That is the best I can give you.
Okay,
I'm not just going to tell you that I don't remember it, because I do.
Okay,
it was extremely relevant to me that Stefan Molynuex, somebody who I've just talked about, planned obsolescence with, in my view, watched a documentary that I wanted to watch about planned obsolescence. Then his reply was what it was, which to me was not really an adequate response. But, to me, basically that's the reason I remembered it, because the response that you gave me was kind of weak. I just let it go because, we're both philosophers. I have respect for your position and just let it at that. I talked to him about it in casual conversation because I talk to him all the time, just like I talk to you. Okay. I don't talk to you as often, obviously, but I, bring you information. I even spread links to your shows. If people want to be conservative libertarians, I say you're better off listening to this guy than Glenn Beck. Okay, but that's my position. No amount of, unfortunately, no amount of, where the way this exchange is going is going to change that. I did not tell him to go tell people you were a liar. I told him that this is the exchange I had with you. That's
so
because
you
that
didn't
is
tell
sincerely
him,
how I remember.
So you didn't tell him that I had watched the documentary. He came up with that on his own?
I told him that I felt, out of the exchange you and I had, that you had watched the documentary, because that is clearly what I understood after reading your response.
So you told him that I had watched the documentary?
That's exactly what I believe to be true, yes. Okay,
but it's not true. Based upon our exchange, that's any kind of certainty, and it's certainly not I have no memory of watching a documentary on light bulbs, right? So you said something that is not true. And now I'm not calling you a liar. This is your memory of it. But when you sort of think back of it at all, and now that you've sort of given me the details and you've heard my sort of response about if this was your question and this was my response, these are the million other things that I could have meant, right? So you understand that you jumped to a conclusion that I had watched the documentary, which is not valid.
Okay. Well, I explained to you why I arrived at the conclusion that I did.
But it's not
That's
valid.
The best I can do for you.
It's not valid. You understand that now?
It's not valid because I don't have a screenshot of it? Or it's not valid because, I don't have a,
even if you said, did you watch this documentary? And I said, who needs a 100-year light bulb? It's not valid to say that it's true that I watched the documentary from that. Because there's 6 million other things, and I just gave you a couple of examples, right? Why would anybody want a 100-year light bulb? Because they move every 3 months on average, or every year on average. Why would anybody want it? Because it might cost too much. Why would anyone want it? Because the ingredients might be too rare. Why would anyone want it? Because if you break it, it might be poison. I don't know, right? There could be any number of reasons I would have responded to that. If you jump to the conclusion that that means I said I watched the documentary, that's an invalid assumption. That's what I'm sort of trying to point out here. Like, if everything that you believe is true, you jumped to a conclusion which is not valid based upon the information, and certainly based upon my memory of having never watched it. And so this is
Okay.
the integrity thing that I'm talking about here, that if you set a ball in motion, it's not a huge ball, it's not going to break the internet or change the course of history or anything, but this is sort of just a basic integrity thing, right? That if you put forward something that turned out to not be true, you have to go and correct it. You have to go clean it up, right? And what you posted here, what you said, you just commented the following. You said, I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt and say that it's quite possible he just doesn't remember watching the documentary. That's not true either. And this is what I'm sort of trying to point out here. Right? The honest statement is there was an ambiguous response. I jumped to a conclusion which is not valid.
Okay. So what would make you happy in this situation?
The truth, which is that
Okay.
I never said that I watched the documentary. You jumped to a conclusion based upon something I said with more information and with my complete lack of memory of watching a documentary and me explaining all the things I could have meant with my response, that you withdraw the idea that I watched the documentary and agreed with it or whatever, right? I mean, that's just not, it's not a valid thing to say. If I said I watched the documentary and here was my response and now I claim to have not watched the documentary, absolutely. Oh, totally. Absolutely. Then you're completely in the right. But if I say who wants a 100-year light bulb, which could mean any one of 6 million different things that has nothing to do with watching the documentary, that's a different matter completely.
The reason that I got the context out of it, Stefan, is I can't imagine why you would ever answer a question was, did you watch the documentary, with a comment that has to do with the content in the documentary, unless you had watched it. That's why I came to that conclusion.
I don't remember
You're
this.
saying that you didn't watch it.
But I don't remember this conversation. I don't remember typing about 100-year light bulbs. I've never heard of 100-year light bulbs. I'm just telling you, it's possible you may be misremembering. You have no proof. This is nothing I remember having anything to do with. And honestly, I could be forgetting this too. I don't think I'd forget watching a documentary about light bulbs, but I may forget typing something like this. But it is not a valid thing to say that I told you I had watched the documentary. That is just not true. This is not a true and supportable statement. Philosophically, morally, right? You understand that, right? You may have jumped to a conclusion. It may have kind of made sense at the time, but it's not a valid conclusion to jump, because I never said I'd watched the documentary.
Okay. I have given people the context of the response.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I can correct might not have remembered, and I'll just put that it's possible that we have a misunderstanding. Will that be sufficient for you?
Well, what would be sufficient to me would be Steph never told me that he'd watched the documentary. I inferred that from something he said, but given that he has not watched the documentary and is not known to be a bald-faced liar, I jumped to a conclusion that was invalid.
Okay, as I've already said, I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt, and that you're not bold-faced lying anything, and that it's very possible that this is a misunderstanding. I'm not going to make a complete retraction, because that's not what I got out of it at all when I talked to you about it.
So
I'm trying. Okay, go ahead.
Well, but you understand that I could have meant even if your recollection of this interaction from a year or two ago, out of thousands of chats that you have, is perfectly accurate, which I doubt. Not because you're dumb or lying, it's just that human memory is ridiculously unreliable, right? Eyewitnesses to things 20 minutes later misremember things, right? You've seen these studies where the gorilla walks through the middle of a room and nobody notices it because there's a woman with big breasts sitting somewhere. Like, you understand, human memory is incredibly fallible, right? We all, I mean, you know that. I'm sure you understand that. So, but even if everything you remember is perfectly correct, it's not valid to say that I watched the documentary. You may have jumped to that conclusion, but it's not a truthful thing to say. You know, I thought from the context of the conversation that he had, but you know, upon further reflection and on talking to him, it's not a valid thing to say. I can't say that he said he did, right? I mean, just, you know what I mean? Like, you just can't get to that place where there wasn't a miscommunication because I said something which you then interpreted. You just made a mistake. That's all. I mean, look, I do it, you do it. I mean, I've had to go on. I've done entire shows where I've corrected things that I've said that are wrong. I've apologized on air to the entire gay and lesbian community for things that they found offensive that I've said. We make mistakes and we go back and we clean them up, right?
Okay. I have told you that I am willing to post that I feel that it's, entirely possible that there's a misunderstanding, that I misinterpreted what you said to me.
Okay. I mean, I can't say anything other than what I've said.
I understand.
All right. Well, I appreciate you letting me talk about this. I hope you understand this is not in particular for my benefit. I don't particularly care. I mean, I get called many worse
Okay,
things than
well,
that, but
Stefan,
I hope that it's for your
well,
benefit as
no,
well. So just be
it's
careful about the
okay.
things
Well,
you
it
put out.
is for my benefit, or I wouldn't have bothered to sit here and listen to the whole thing.
Right.
Okay. Okay, look, you and I, at least I hope anyway, that it's true that we have a mutual respect for one another, and that's the reason why I'm willing to point out that it's very possible that this is a misunderstanding, and that, you know, uh, I came to the conclusion that I did based upon the context, but that still could once again be inaccurate. Okay, but I know that I don't generally make statements, particularly to friends of mine, just based on nothing. It's important to note that, I came to the conclusion that I did given the context of the conversation. Okay, it could still be very inaccurate. I mean, we didn't really talk about it in depth much more after that. But that's the reason I came to the conclusion that I did. I don't believe you're a liar, and I'll even be willing to tell people that if that'll help you basically help you feel better about the situation. But um, I still think at the end of the day, particularly when it comes to the audience, your best bet is just to review the details and then just respond and then be done with it.
I'm
You and
sorry,
I
sorry.
can have
Could
a
you just?
conversation and an
I just
exchange.
missed that last thing you were saying. Could you just repeat it? Apologize.
Oh, sure. My suggestion to you is at the end of the day, just review the material in question and then give your response. And then at the end of the day, what I said isn't going to matter. Particularly the people who listen to your broadcast, with an exception of some of the very open-minded people that are out there, are not going to listen to a word I say anyway. So it's not even relevant. My advice to you, however, to handle any kind of damage this could have done in regards to your reputation with your audience is just to address the information and then make your own response and then move on. I'm going to go ahead and give you the statement that I just said that I would make. Okay? But that alone is not going to be enough. That's what I'm trying to say. Just go ahead and address the information, and then you'll have a topic for a show, and take it from there.
Oh, it sounds like a very interesting documentary, and if it's a very credible attack on the theory that collusion is difficult in a free market, I welcome the opportunity to look at it. It sounds very interesting.
Well, and it's important to note that it's not to say that the state cannot assist in monopolies or cartels. It absolutely could. The question is whether or not the state is everything in regards to those things, and I don't think it is. I think that the state is just one weapon on the table. And it is a very powerful weapon, but you can collectively, just through having enough capital gather together, it's a free association where people can decide we are going to offer this product only with these specifications. And yes, it is possible that somebody could compete, and they even do. Like you see it and we talked about this in our debate, you see it in oil companies when they compete by a few cents at the fuel pump, but they still can collectively get together and raise the overall gas prices and get away with it. We see it in Michigan all the time. And then compete by 2 or 3 cents because it's still better for the entire oil industry if you're paying $5 a gallon or whatever. I mean, it's never been five; it gets to like 4.20 sometimes. Um, but that's essentially the idea behind the cartel. And yes, there will be competition, but they can all agree that they're better off, that their particular commodity is generally accepted in the market to cost at least this much. That's the idea behind cartels within a free market.
Right. Well, very interesting, and I'll check out the documentary, and I certainly do appreciate us having the chat about this. It would have bothered me, so I really appreciate you taking the time.